My mom said my cooking was pathetic, so I opened a five-star restaurant and banned her. The words still burn in my throat like acid reflux, rising up whenever I think I've finally managed to swallow them down. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. The curl of her lip, the dismissive flick of her wrist as she pushed away the plate I'd spent hours preparing. That special birthday dinner I'd crafted with trembling hands and hopeful heart, reduced to garbage with a single word. Pathetic. I remember standing there, wooden spoon still clutched in my sweating palm, the kitchen smelling of seared garlic and rosemary. My specialty herb-crusted lamb, the one recipe I'd practiced for weeks. The one I thought would finally make her eyes light up with something other than disappointment. The silence that followed her verdict stretched between us like pulled taffy, sticky and uncomfortable. My heartbeat hammered in my ears as I watched her rise from the table, scrape my hours of work into the trash, and order takeout. All without meeting my eyes once. Just another failure in a lifetime of them, as far as she was concerned. That night, I didn't cry. Something hardened instead, crystallizing in my chest like sugar turning to caramel. Sweet turned bitter, soft turned hard. I lay awake staring at the ceiling of my childhood bedroom, 32 years old and feeling like I was 16 again. Always seeking approval, always coming up short. But something was different this time. The hurt transformed into something else entirely. Something with edges. The next morning I packed my bags. Left a note on the counter beside the coffee maker. Didn't wait to hear her morning criticisms or see that familiar look of disappointment. My hands shook as I started the car, but they steadied once I hit the highway. In the rearview mirror, the house where I'd never been good enough grew smaller until it disappeared completely. I'd saved enough to last me 6 months, maybe 8 if I was careful. Enough time to reinvent myself, to prove her wrong. The thought pulsed with each mile marker that flashed by. I wasn't just leaving, I was incubating something new. Something that would rise from the ashes of her criticism and take flight. Culinary school wasn't easy. My classmates were mostly fresh-faced kids, straight out of high school, while my hands already bore the small scars of someone who'd been cooking for decades. But I had something they didn't. Desperation. Fire. Purpose. Each knife skill I mastered, each sauce I perfected, I heard her voice calling me pathetic. And I used it like fuel. The instructors noticed my intensity. The way I'd stay long after others had gone home, practicing the same julienne cut over and over until my fingers cramped. The way I'd test and retest a recipe, tweaking proportions by minute amounts until it sang. There's a difference between cooking with love and cooking with the need to prove something. One is gentle, the other has teeth. I graduated top of my class. Not that she knew. I hadn't spoken to her in 18 months by then. Sometimes my phone would light up with her name, but I'd watch it ring until the screen went dark again. Each unanswered call was another brick in the wall I was building between my past and my future. The apprenticeship at Michelin-starred La Maison came next. 16-hour days of being barked at by Chef Laurent, whose temper was as legendary as his coq au vin. But after years of my mother's cutting remarks, his criticism felt almost refreshing. Clinical, impersonal, and always about the food, never about me. I soaked up his knowledge like a sponge, cataloging techniques and flavor combinations, filing them away for what was to come. At night in my tiny apartment, I'd sketch out restaurant layouts, test menu items on my one day off, plan, calculate, dream. The restaurant took shape in my mind long before it existed in reality. I knew every detail, from the warm lighting that would make everyone look their best to the specific weight of the silverware that would rest in guests' hands. Nothing would be pathetic. Everything would be perfect. Finding investors was the hardest part. Standing in front of those cool-eyed men and women in expensive suits, pitching my vision while my heart thrashed against my ribs like a wild animal. With each rejection, I heard her voice again. Pathetic. But I kept going. Refined my pitch. Showed them my passion wasn't just talk. Brought sample dishes to meetings. Watched their expressions change from skepticism to surprise as they tasted what I could create. On the 9th pitch, I got my yes. 3 investors, willing to take a chance on my concept. Elevated comfort food with global influences. Food that reminded people of home, but better than they remembered it. Familiar enough to bring comfort, innovative enough to impress. The irony wasn't lost on me. Creating the warmth and comfort through food that I'd never received at my own family table. The space we found was perfect. An old brownstone with good bones and high ceilings, needing love but structurally sound. Like me, I sometimes thought during those early renovation days. Standing in dust and chaos, I could already see what it would become. My fingers would trace the walls and I could feel the future humming beneath them, waiting to emerge. Those months of preparation passed in a blur of permits, construction delays, staff interviews, menu testing. I slept maybe 4 hours a night, often on the cot I kept in what would become my office. Every decision, from the font on the menus to the specific shade of the napkins, passed through my hands. This place would be an extension of me. My vision, my redemption, my answer to that one crushing word, pathetic. We named it Homecoming. Not for my homecoming, I had no intention of ever going back, but for the feeling I wanted to create. That moment when you return to a place where you are completely known and completely loved. The experience I'd always craved but never had. Opening night arrived after a final week of 18-hour days and stress so intense I could taste it, metallic and sharp on my tongue. Standing in the kitchen as the staff made final preparations, I felt a curious calm descend. This was it, the culmination of everything I'd worked for. Through the small window in the kitchen door, I could see the dining room filling up. Food critics, local influencers, the investors and their friends, all coming to judge what I had created. The first orders came in, and we moved like dancers in the kitchen, precise and coordinated. Each plate that left my hands was a statement, an argument, a rebuttal. This is who I am. This is what I can do. I am not what you called me. By the end of the night, I knew. The way the dining room had hummed with conversation and pleasure, the clean plates returning to the kitchen. The words I overheard as I made brief appearances tableside. We had done it. Homecoming wasn't just good, it was extraordinary. The reviews confirmed it. 4 stars from the city paper. Glowing write-ups in food blogs. A waiting list that quickly stretched to months. My phone rang constantly now. Interview requests, congratulations, booking attempts from people trying to bypass the reservation system. 6 months in, when the first national food magazine did a feature on us, I knew she would see it. My mother obsessively followed food publications, critiquing restaurants she'd never visit and chefs whose names she'd mispronounce. It was only a matter of time before she made the connection, before she realized the Chef M. Williams profiled was her child, the one whose food she'd scraped into the trash. The call came on a Tuesday. I was in the middle of prep, hands deep in bread dough, when my sous chef told me there was someone insistent on the phone. Something in his expression made my stomach tighten. I knew before he said it. I washed my hands slowly, methodically, putting off the inevitable for 30 more seconds. Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered, or maybe I had just grown bigger in our time apart. The usual criticisms were absent as she stumbled through congratulations that sounded foreign in her mouth. The silence between her words stretched uncomfortably as I offered nothing to help her along. Let her feel the awkwardness. Let her work for this conversation. Then came what I'd been waiting for, her request for a table. Friday night, prime time, for her and 3 friends from her garden club. She wanted to show off her connection, to bask in reflected glory now that I'd proven myself valuable. Now that I was no longer pathetic, my heart pounded so hard I could see my chef's coat moving with each beat. This moment, this exact moment, had fueled me through the toughest days of the past 2 years. I'd played it out in my mind 100 different ways, and yet now that it was here, I felt oddly detached, as if watching from outside my body. I told her no. Calmly, without emotion, I explained that homecoming was fully booked for the next 3 months. And when she pulled the mother card and demanded special treatment, I delivered the line I'd rehearsed in my head during countless nights. I'm sorry, but homecoming has a strict policy against serving guests who have previously described the chef's cooking as pathetic. I'm sure you understand. The silence that followed felt like victory. Pure, clean, sharp as the edge of my favorite knife. I could almost see her face, the shock, the disbelief that I would dare. In that moment, I realized I'd been cooking for her approval my entire life, seeking validation through the meals I created, hoping food could build the bridge between us that nothing else had. I hung up while she was still sputtering justifications. Went back to my bread dough, feeling the living texture respond to my hands. The kitchen around me hummed with activity. My kitchen, my world, built from the ground up. Built from rejection and determination and countless hours of work. That night, as service hit its peak and the kitchen moved in perfect synchronicity, I felt something shift inside me. The revenge I dreamed of for so long, it had happened, yes. But it wasn't the triumph I'd expected. Instead, I felt hollow, empty. As if in banning her, I'd given her more power than she deserved. Made her the center of my story once again. Months passed. Homecoming thrived. We earned our first Michelin star, then our second. Celebrities requested tables. Waiting lists grew longer. I expanded, opening a second location, then a third. Published a cookbook. Made appearances on cooking shows. Success piled upon success until the original catalyst, that single word, pathetic, seemed distant and small. She tried again, of course. Sent messages through relatives. Appeared outside the restaurant once, only to be turned away by staff who'd been well briefed. Each attempt felt less and less important, like the fading aftershocks of an earthquake that had once leveled my world. 3 years after opening night, as I was locking up after service, I noticed an envelope that had been slipped under the door. Her handwriting hadn't changed. Still the precise, controlled script I'd recognize anywhere. Inside, no demands or justifications. Just a yellowed recipe card for berry cobbler, the one my grandmother had made, the first thing I'd ever learned to bake. At the bottom in faded ink, "You were never pathetic." I was afraid. "I'm sorry." I stood in the empty restaurant, that small card trembling in my fingers. The familiar anger rose, then receded, replaced by something more complex. Not forgiveness, I wasn't there yet, might never be, but understanding perhaps. The recognition that she too had been shaped by words that cut, that perhaps her cruelty had been born from her own wounds, her own failures. The next morning I added berry cobbler to the dessert menu. Not exactly like my grandmother's recipe, I'd elevated it, refined it, made it my own. But its heart was the same, the soul of it unchanged by my technical improvements. I didn't call her, didn't invite her, but I knew she'd hear about it. In that way, news travels in families even when direct lines of communication are cut. A small olive branch extended across the battlefield we'd made of our relationship. Not surrender, but acknowledgement. My restaurants are no longer about her. They're about the food. About the guests who come through our doors seeking comfort and connection. About the staff who have become family in all the ways that matter. About taking the broken pieces of my past and building something beautiful from them. Sometimes on quiet nights after service, I stand in the empty dining room and remember that moment in her kitchen, wooden spoon in hand, heartbreaking as she called my food pathetic. How that moment nearly destroyed me. How it ultimately made me. How revenge, once my guiding star, has been replaced by something else. The simple joy of creation. Of feeding people. Of making a space where nobody ever feels the way she made me feel. I don't know if I'll ever serve her at one of my tables. If I'll ever be ready to watch her taste what I've become in her absence. But I know this. My cooking isn't about her approval anymore. It's about my own standards, my own vision. The restaurants aren't my answer to her criticism. They're my answer to the question of who I was always meant to be. And that answer, written in reduction sauces and perfectly risen soufflés, in warm hospitality and the hum of satisfied conversation, could never, by anyone's definition, be called pathetic.